Welcome. I hope you enjoy these set of pictures about our trip to New Zealand. We were visiting friends, gardens and doing some walking. We will start with the Broadfield Garden near Christchurch. The Broadfield Garden is 3.5 hectares and was started in 1993. The owner, David Hobbs, told us a story about this pond. He said that during an earthquake, the land was tilted and all of the water rushed down to one end onto the lawns. Afterwards, it levelled again and the water ran back in, leaving the fish on the lawn. He quickly found a brush and swept them back into the pond, and they swam off fine.
I do, just as you say. Why must I just give you away? My son, I don't like fire. It must have been that something that was called fate kept on saying I saw them all, just couldn't fall till we met. It had to be you. It had to be you. I wandered around and finally found somebody who could make me be true, could make me be blue, and even glad just to be sad, thinking of you. What I've seen might never be me, might never be cross, or try to be false. They wouldn't do for nobody else. Baby, that with all your faults, I love you still. Had to be you, wonderful you. Had to be you.
Next, we're heading for the Southern Alps and some alpines. Mount Cook and me on a sunny day. Many of the bushes in New Zealand are spiny. This is curious, as there are no native herbivores that would eat them. Spines are modified leaves that reduce water loss, so it may be an adaptation to drought. A mountain pratia. This is related to our blue bedding lobelias. On first spotting this flower amongst the rocks, I mistakenly thought it was an edelweiss. It is, however, a helichrysum, like the everlasting flowers grown for dry flowers in the UK. Although called a lily, it is in fact a member of the buttercup family. Looking down the Hooker Valley, it was named after the English botanist Joseph Hooker, who spent 3 months in New Zealand in 1843. A hebe at home in its alpine habitat, making it a tough and useful garden plant. Looking towards Mount Cook on a rainy day, we climbed up to look for some insect-eating plants of the genus Drosera, the sundews. They live in nutrient-poor bogs around ponds. The red floating pondweed is probably Potamogeton cheesemanii. The common UK broadleaf pondweed is a relation, the Potamogeton natans. Charles Darwin did the first experiments on insect-eating plants. With Drosera, insects are digested by the globules of enzymes on the leaves. There are several different enzymes, including one called peroxidase, which is a bit like the hydrogen peroxide used for bleaching your hair. Another bog-living plant is the sun orchid. This was the only native orchid we saw on our trip in New Zealand. Next, the Dream Garden, Glenorchy. This view is from inside the cabin built and furnished by the owners of the Dream Garden. Thomas and Christy Schneider are originally from Switzerland and the Philippines and have lived in New Zealand for 26 years. They have not only handcrafted the interior, but made an extraordinary garden as well.
We'll have a blue room, a new room for two rooms. For every day's a holiday because you're married to me. Like a ballroom, a small room, a hall room, where I can smoke my pipe away with your head upon my knee. Bum bum ba da dee 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 da. Da 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 dee da 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 dee dee doo 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 da 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 da. You know my trousseau and Robinson is not so far from worldly cares as our blue room will stand.
No visit to New Zealand is complete without trying the green lip mussels. Next, we are off to the North Island and the Wangiri Quarry Garden. Stone for road building was extracted from the quarry. The site was then converted into a garden by adding soil to the terraces and building a dam to create a lake. It makes an ideal space for showing off a variety of sculptures and specimen plants. Milkweeds are used as a host for hatching the monarch butterfly. This one is a native of Southeast Africa, but it seems to grow well here. Hope's cycad from Queensland, Australia is the largest cycad in the world and can grow up to 50 feet tall. Cycads are over 200 million years old, from before the dinosaurs. Botanically, they're more closely related to conifers than to flowering plants. This old shovel reminded me of a children's storybook I used to read to my children called Mike Mulligan and Mary Ann. Next, we return to the South Island to the Fiordland. Northofagus forest in the Fiordland. The southern beeches are related to our beeches but have smaller leaves. With global warming, it may be possible to grow them in the UK. This is a bait box. Introduced predators such as mice, rats and possums kill young kiwis, causing only 5% of kiwi chicks to reach adulthood. The New Zealand government is using bait boxes to try to kill these predators. This has been a conservation success story, and many of the offshore islands are now predator-free and have stable populations of kiwis. Can you spot the mouse? When walking through the forest, we often came across trees with blackened trunks. Initially, I thought it was fire damage. However, looking closely, the bark was covered with a sooty black mould. This is the result of honeydew from a scale insect that drips onto the bark and is then colonised by a sooty mould. Spectacular tree ferns photographed in Doubtful Sound. The silver fern is the New Zealand national emblem. The New Zealand cabbage tree. The leaves were eaten by the early settlers as a substitute for cabbage. Hunting through the Christchurch Botanic Gardens. New Zealand has several fine botanic gardens in Dunedin, Wellington and Auckland. The Niku palm is the only endemic palm and was used extensively by the Maori. Clare on the Queen Charlotte track near Nelson. Behind is a manuka tree. The famous mountaineer Sir Edmund Hillary's parents were beekeepers and he grew up driving around collecting manuka honey. Kauri trees are the largest and oldest trees in New Zealand. The timber was used by white settlers mainly for shipbuilding. Now there is only 5% of the original forest left. Recently a fungal disease has started killing them, and to stop the spread some of the walking tracks in the North Island have been closed. The lancewoods have a juvenile and a mature form. Leaves down when young and up when older. We visited Doubtful Sound in the Fiordland on South Island. The weather was absolutely appalling, but the boat we stayed on had their own lobster pots. Yum! On to the Oenetari Garden. Although the original gardens at Oenetari were established in 1865, extensive restoration work was required after the Christchurch earthquake in 2010. A fantastic view from the house. The Norfolk Island pine has strikingly symmetrical branches. and is widely planted in New Zealand. It's not a true pine, but a member of the monkey puzzle tree family. A quick Kate stop before our last garden. We stopped at some great cafes on our trip. They're mostly privately owned, so no Starbucks or Costa, just lovely coffee and cakes. Our last garden is at Akaroa. The Giant's Garden is owned by Josie Martin, a sculptor who has her very own style. Akaroa was originally a French settlement, and many of the houses, including Josie's, are in the French colonial style.
Praise rhythm is the doorway. I'll go my way, you'll go your way. Praise rhythm, from now on we're through. Here's where we have a showdown. I'm too high hat, you're too low down. Praise rhythm, here's goodbye to you. They say that when a highbrow meets a lowbrow, walking along Broadway, soon the highbrow ain't it a shame, and you're to blame. What's the use of prohibition? You produce the same condition. Praise rhythm, I've gone crazy too. The Emperor Nero in Rome was a very hot town. Father Knickerbocker, you'll have to forgive me, I play while your city burns down. Through all its nightlife I fiddle away, not the bright life, the thick of the pay. Someday I will bid it goodbye. I'll put my fiddle away and I'll say, praise rhythm, here's the doorway. Go my way, you go your way. Praise rhythm, from now on we're through. Here's where we have a showdown. You see, I'm too high hat, you're too low down. Praise rhythm, here's goodbye to you. They say that when a highbrow meets a lowbrow, walking along Broadway, soon the highbrow, he has no brow, made in the shade. Well, you're to blame.
Goodbye and thanks for listening.